The woman's scream tore through the silence of the funeral hall, causing several mourners to gasp and others to physically recoil. Nia Kim, her dark hands gripping the polished mahogany of the coffin, stood trembling but defiant. Her chest heaved with each breath, her eyes wild with conviction as they swept across the shocked faces of Seoul's elite. "Mr. Kim is alive. This is all a lie," she shouted again, her Afro-Korean features contorted with desperation. The pristine white chrysanthemum surrounding the coffin shook as her grip tightened, petals falling to the marble floor like snow. For 3 eternal seconds, the room remained frozen in collective shock. Then chaos erupted. "Remove that woman immediately." Min-hee Kim's voice cut through the growing murmurs, her face a mask of cold fury barely contained beneath her black veil. 2 security guards rushed forward, their hands roughly closing around Nia's arms. "Let go of me." Nia struggled against their grip, her eyes never leaving the sealed coffin. "Open it. Open it and you'll see, there's no body. Kim Ji-woon isn't dead." The mourners, business tycoons, politicians, and underworld figures alike, exchanged uneasy glances. What had begun as a solemn tribute to one of South Korea's most feared and respected men was devolving into something unthinkable. Kim Ji-woon, CEO of Hanseong Group and Seoul's most powerful mafia figure, supposedly lay dead in that coffin, but this Afro-Korean maid was claiming otherwise. Tae-ho Kim, the son and heir apparent, strode forward, his face contorted with rage. "How dare you desecrate my father's funeral," he hissed, looming over Nia as the guards restrained her. "Your delusions have no place here." But Nia's accusation had already planted a seed of doubt. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through autumn leaves. "Why is the coffin sealed? Who is this woman? What if she's telling the truth?" From the back of the hall, a distinguished older man stepped forward, Park Sung-min, Ji-woon's personal attorney for over 20 years. His expression was unreadable as he raised a hand. "Perhaps," he said, his voice carrying authority that silenced the room, "we should consider the young woman's claim." Min-hee's eyes flashed dangerously behind her veil. "This is absurd. My husband is dead." The doctor confirmed it. "Then you won't object to opening the coffin," Park replied calmly, his gaze steady. "To put everyone's mind at ease." The tension in the room thickened until it felt almost impossible to breathe. Min-hee and Tae-ho exchanged a look that lasted a fraction too long, and in that moment, Nia knew her suspicions were correct. "Open it," came a commanding voice from the entrance. All heads turned to see an elderly woman leaning on a traditional wooden cane, Ji-woon's mother, rarely seen in public these days. "Open my son's coffin now." With the family matriarch's intervention, there was no more room for refusal. As funeral attendants moved hesitantly toward the coffin, the security guards loosened their grip on Nia. The lid was raised with excruciating slowness. Gasps echoed through the hall as the empty coffin was revealed, empty save for weighted blankets arranged to simulate a body. Before anyone could react further, the double doors at the back of the hall swung open. Leaning on a cane but undeniably alive, Kim Ji-woon entered, his face gaunt but his eyes burning with an intensity that had made him legendary in Seoul's underworld. "I believe," he said, his voice carrying despite its weakness, "that this concludes my wife and son's attempt to bury me before my time." Min-hee swayed on her feet, her perfect composure finally shattered. Tae-ho looked as though he might vomit, his face ashen beneath his designer suit. And at the center of it all stood Nia Kim, the Afro-Korean maid who had dared to speak truth to power, setting in motion events that would topple one of Korea's most feared criminal empires and transform her life in ways she could never have imagined. This is the beginning of our story today, a tale of betrayal, courage, and the unexpected power of a voice that refused to be silenced. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to our Afro-Korean channel for more captivating stories that explore the rarely told experiences of Africans in Korean society. Now, let's dive deeper into what led to this explosive moment and what happened afterward. The Kim mansion stood imposing on the outskirts of Seoul, a blend of traditional Korean architecture and modern luxury. From the outside, its sweeping roof tiles and manicured gardens projected power and tradition. Inside, it was a labyrinth of secrets and silence. For Nia Kim, life within those walls had been a careful dance of invisibility. Each morning began at 5 a.m., when she would rise quietly in her tiny room in the servants' quarters. The space was barely large enough for a single bed and a small dresser, but she had decorated it with a few treasured photos, her Ghanaian father in diplomatic attire standing proudly beside her Korean mother, both looking young and hopeful. Her daily routine never varied: prepare breakfast, clean the main rooms, attend to any specific tasks assigned by Mrs. Kim, and remain as unobtrusive as possible. The household staff, all Korean, had initially regarded her with suspicion and curiosity. Her fluent Korean surprised them, though her accent occasionally betrayed her mixed heritage. Over time, they'd grown accustomed to her presence, but never fully accepted her as one of their own. "Yo, careful with that," barked head housekeeper Ms. Park as Nia dusted one of the priceless celadon vases in the main hall 3 months earlier. "One break, and Mrs. Kim will have your visa revoked faster than you can blink." Nia nodded, having heard the threat countless times before. Though born in Korea, her status always felt precarious, a feeling that Mrs. Kim cultivated deliberately. The mansion operated on strict hierarchies. At the top sat Ji-woon Kim, the patriarch whose presence was more often felt than seen. Below him was Min-hee, who ran the household with cold precision. Then came their son Tae-ho, ambitious and volatile, followed by their daughter Eun-ji, who seemed perpetually caught between family loyalty and her own moral compass. It was during Ji-woon's 60th birthday celebration that Nia first caught his attention. She had been serving drinks to guests when a prominent politician made a crude remark about her appearance. "Where did you find this exotic specimen, Ji-woon?" the man had asked, his breath heavy with whiskey. "She's quite a departure from your usual taste." Before Ji-woon could respond, Nia had calmly placed the tray down and said in perfect, formal Korean, "Would you prefer I serve someone else, sir? I wouldn't want my presence to distract from the celebration of Mr. Kim's accomplishments." The politician had fumbled for words, caught off guard by her composure and eloquence. Ji-woon had watched the exchange with interest, and from that day forward, seemed to actually see her when she entered a room. 2 weeks after the party, Ji-woon had summoned Nia to his private study, a request that sent waves of anxiety through her. The study was off-limits to household staff unless specifically called. "You handled Senator Park with remarkable grace," Ji-woon said when she entered, not looking up from his papers. Most would have either lashed out or cowered. "I've had practice, sir," Nia replied simply. Ji-woon looked up then, studying her face. "I imagine you have. How long have you worked in my home?" 2 years and 4 months, sir. "And in that time, I've barely noticed you. That's quite a skill." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit." Hesitantly, Nia sat down, perched on the edge of the seat. "Tell me about yourself." The request was so unexpected that Nia momentarily lost her composure. "Sir. Your background. Your family. How a half-African woman speaks Korean better than most natives." Nia had carefully shared the basics: her diplomat father, her Korean mother who had fallen in love despite societal disapproval, her education at Seoul National University before her parents' deaths in a car accident left her without financial support. "And with a degree in international business, you chose to be a maid?" Ji-woon asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "I chose to survive, sir," Nia answered honestly. "In Korea, my options were limited by how people see me, not by what I know." Something in her answer seemed to resonate with Ji-woon. From that day forward, he began requesting her presence more often, to serve his tea, to tidy his study, and eventually, to simply talk with him when insomnia kept him awake into the early hours. It was during these late-night conversations that Nia began to understand the complex man behind the fearsome reputation. Ji-woon had built his empire from nothing, starting as a street orphan during the Korean War. His legitimate businesses spanned construction, shipping, and technology, but whispers of his connections to organized crime were never far behind his success. "Do you fear me, Nia?" he asked one night, as she arranged his medications beside his tea. "I respect your power," she answered carefully. Ji-woon had laughed, a rare, genuine sound. A diplomatic answer. "Your father would be proud." "My father believed in speaking truth to power, sir. But he also believed in choosing the right moment to do so." As weeks passed, Ji-woon's health began to deteriorate. His insomnia worsened, and Nia often found him staring out the window of his study at 3 a.m., lost in thought. "My wife has been meeting with our accountants without my knowledge," he confided one night, his voice barely above a whisper. "3 times this month." Nia remained silent, knowing he wasn't seeking a response. "And my son has been courting my business rivals, hosting private dinners he thinks I don't know about." Ji-woon turned to face her. "Do you know what that means, Nia?" "It could mean many things, sir. It means the vultures are circling, waiting for me to die." He picked up a crystal paperweight, turning it in his hands. "They think I'm blind to their ambitions." Nia had witnessed enough to know he wasn't being paranoid. Min-hee had indeed been meeting with financial advisors behind closed doors, and Tae-ho had hosted several businessmen known to be competitors of his father. "Sir, if I may." Nia hesitated, then continued when Ji-woon nodded. "In Ghana, my father's people have a saying, 'The lion doesn't turn around when a small dog barks.'" Ji-woon studied her face. "And what does that mean to you?" "It means that sometimes, appearing not to notice gives you the advantage of surprise." A slow smile spread across Ji-woon's face. "You are wasted as a maid, Nia Kim." The following week, everything changed. During a business dinner hosted at the mansion, Ji-woon collapsed. The family doctor, Dr. Choi, was called immediately, and Ji-woon was rushed to a private hospital. Nia watched from the shadows as Min-hee took control with alarming efficiency. Within hours, she had contacted the company's board members, reassured key business partners, and instructed the staff on a new protocol. No one was to speak to the press or answer questions about Ji-woon's condition. "He's had a stroke," Min-hee announced to the family in the hospital waiting room. "Dr. Choi says the next 48 hours are critical." Tae-ho immediately pulled out his phone. "I'll call Attorney Park. We need to ensure business operations continue smoothly." "I've already spoken with him," Min-hee replied coolly. "As per the contingency plan, I will temporarily assume leadership until your father recovers." "But the board expects me to," Tae-ho began, his face flushing with anger. "The board will do as they're told," Min-hee cut him off. "This is a family matter." Eun-ji, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "Shouldn't we be focusing on father's health rather than who'll run his company?" Both Min-hee and Tae-ho turned to her with identical expressions of contempt. "Don't be naive," Tae-ho snapped. "Business doesn't stop because one man falls ill." Nia, who had accompanied them to the hospital to carry Min-hee's personal items, kept her eyes down but her ears open. The coldness with which they discussed Ji-woon's condition chilled her. There was calculation where there should have been concern. Later that night, as Nia brought fresh clothes to Min-hee at the hospital, she overheard a conversation that confirmed her worst suspicions. "The offshore accounts are ready," Min-hee was saying quietly into her phone. "Once we have access to the main holdings, we can begin the transfers." Tae-ho is impatient, but he'll have to wait until everything is secure. There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. "No, Dr. Choi assures me he won't recover consciousness. The stroke was severe, and even if he survives, he'll be in no condition to challenge our decisions." Another pause. "The will is being handled. Park Sung-min is loyal to Ji-woon, but we have contingencies for that as well." Nia froze outside the door, her heart pounding. She had suspected ambition, but this sounded like something far more sinister. Over the next 3 days, Ji-woon remained in critical condition. Min-hee maintained a public facade of concern while privately orchestrating what appeared to be a complete takeover of his assets. Taeho was frequently seen arguing with his mother in hushed but heated exchanges, clearly impatient with her methodical approach. On the fourth day, Dr. Choi announced that Ji-woon had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news spread quickly through Seoul's business and criminal underworlds. Condolences flooded in, as did speculation about the future of Hanseong Group and its various enterprises. Min-hee, dressed in traditional Korean mourning attire, appeared briefly before the press to thank them for respecting the family's privacy during this difficult time. What few knew was that Nia had been called to Ji-woon's hospital room the night before his reported death. A private nurse had escorted her through a back entrance, and she had found Ji-woon awake and alert, though visibly weakened. "Nia," he had whispered, gesturing for her to come closer. "Listen carefully. There isn't much time." Confused but obedient, she had leaned in. "I need you to be my eyes and ears now more than ever," he said, his voice barely audible. "What you see in the coming days will test your loyalty and your courage." "Sir, I don't understand." "You will." He had gripped her hand with surprising strength. "When the time comes, speak the truth, no matter who tries to silence you." Before she could ask for clarification, Dr. Choi had entered and immediately escorted her out. The following morning, the announcement of Ji-woon's death left Nia reeling. She had seen him alive just hours before. Had his condition deteriorated so rapidly? Or was something more sinister at play? As funeral preparations began, Nia noticed several disturbing details. Min-hee insisted on a closed coffin, citing tradition and dignity. The family members allowed to view the body were strictly limited, and the funeral home staff seemed unusually nervous. Most tellingly, attorney Park Sung-min appeared troubled during his visits to the Kim residence, his conversations with Min-hee tense and clipped. 2 days before the funeral, Nia was summoned to Min-hee's office and summarily dismissed from her position. "Your services are no longer required," Min-hee stated flatly. "You will be paid 3 months' salary as severance. I expect you to vacate your room by tomorrow morning." "May I ask why, Mrs. Kim?" Nia asked, struggling to maintain her composure. "My husband may have had a peculiar fondness for you, but I run this household now. I prefer staff who understand their place." The implication was clear: Nia knew too much and was too close to Ji-woon to be trusted. That night, as Nia packed her meager belongings, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Eun-ji standing there, looking anxious. "May I come in?" the young woman asked, glancing nervously down the hallway. Once inside, Eun-ji spoke quickly. "I know my mother dismissed you, and I can't change that, but I wanted to give you this." She handed Nia an envelope. "It's not much, but it should help until you find another position." Nia was touched by the gesture but more concerned about what was happening. "Eun-ji, before I go, I need to ask you something. The night before your father supposedly died, I saw him. He was awake and lucid." Eun-ji's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Dr. Choi said he never regained consciousness after the stroke." "I know what I saw," Nia insisted. "Something isn't right about all this." Eun-ji looked conflicted. "Nia, my family, there are things you don't understand. For your own safety, please take the money and forget whatever you think you know." But Nia couldn't forget. As she left the Kim mansion the next morning, she was certain of 2 things: Ji-woon had been alive and aware the night before his reported death, and his family was hiding something significant. Instead of looking for new employment, Nia used her savings to rent a small room near the hospital where Ji-woon had been treated. She spent days observing the comings and goings, noting that Dr. Choi continued to visit regularly even though his patient was supposedly deceased. On the eve of the funeral, Nia received an anonymous text message: "Tomorrow, look for the truth, not the appearance." The message confirmed her suspicions. Someone wanted her to speak up, and she had a strong feeling it was Ji-woon himself. Which brings us back to the funeral hall, where Nia's declaration that Ji-woon was still alive had thrown the carefully orchestrated proceedings into chaos. As security guards held her arms, Attorney Park approached, his expression unreadable. On what basis do you make this claim? He asked, his voice carrying through the now silent hall. I saw Mr. Kim alive the night before his supposed death, Nia stated firmly. He spoke to me. And since then, Dr. Choi has been visiting the hospital daily even though there's supposedly no patient. Min-hee's laugh was brittle. This is absurd. The girl is clearly delusional. My husband suffered a fatal stroke. Dr. Choi can confirm this. Dr. Choi, who had been standing near the family, stepped forward reluctantly. Mrs. Kim is correct. Chairman Kim passed away due to complications from his stroke. Then you won't object to opening the coffin, Nia challenged, her heart pounding but her voice steady. A gasp rippled through the crowd. In Korean tradition, viewing the deceased was common, but Min-hee had insisted on a closed coffin, citing Ji-woon's wishes for dignity in death. This is outrageous. Tae-ho exploded. We will not desecrate my father's funeral to satisfy the delusions of a servant. But the damage was done. Whispers spread through the gathering, and several of Ji-woon's oldest business associates stepped forward. If there's nothing to hide, opening the coffin should settle this matter quickly, one elderly man said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of respect in Seoul's business community. Min-hee's face had gone pale, but she maintained her composure. This is a violation of our family's grief and my husband's wishes. Actually, Attorney Park interjected, pulling a document from his breast pocket, according to Chairman Kim's final instructions, which he entrusted to me, in the event of any question regarding the circumstances of his death, a verification of his remains is explicitly permitted. Min-hee's composure finally cracked. This is preposterous. I am his wife. I know his wishes. But the crowd's mood had shifted. What had begun as scandalous was now suspicious. Why such resistance to a simple confirmation? Open it, came a voice from the back of the hall. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman leaning on a cane, Ji-woon's mother, who rarely left her traditional Hanok home in the countryside. Open it now. With the family matriarch's command, there was no more room for debate. Funeral staff were instructed to unseal the coffin. The crowd held its collective breath as the lid was slowly raised. Attorney Park and two of Ji-woon's oldest friends stepped forward to witness. The gasps were immediate and deafening. The coffin was empty save for weighted blankets arranged to simulate a body. Before anyone could react, the doors at the back of the hall swung open. Leaning on a cane but very much alive, Kim Ji-woon entered, flanked by two men unknown to most in the room. I believe this concludes the charade, he said, his voice weaker than before but unmistakable. Min-hee swayed on her feet, her face ashen. Tae-ho looked as though he might be sick. Only Eun-ji seemed genuinely overjoyed, breaking protocol to run to her father and embrace him. How? Min-hee finally managed, her carefully constructed world crumbling before her eyes. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the private meetings? The altered documents? The gradual isolation from my own board of directors? Ji-woon asked, making his way slowly to the front of the room. I've survived far worse than family betrayal, Min-hee. He turned to address the stunned crowd. I apologize for the deception, but it was necessary to reveal the truth. My wife and son have been systematically attempting to seize control of my companies and assets. They believed my illness provided the perfect opportunity. That's a lie. Tae-ho shouted, but his protest sounded hollow even to his own ears. Ji-woon nodded to Attorney Park, who produced a thick folder. We have documented evidence of forged signatures, unauthorized account access, and recorded conversations outlining their plans. All of this has been verified and witnessed by independent parties. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Several people began to edge toward the exits, not wanting to be associated with what was clearly becoming a major scandal. You orchestrated all of this just to trap us? Min-hee asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. I orchestrated nothing, Ji-woon replied calmly. I simply created the conditions for truth to reveal itself. You did the rest. He turned to Nia, who still stood between two security guards. "Release her immediately," he commanded. The guards dropped her arms and stepped back. Nia Kim saw what others chose to ignore, Ji-woon continued. "She spoke when others remained silent. For that courage, she has my eternal gratitude." The events that followed unfolded with dizzying speed. Police arrived to escort Min-hee and Tae-ho for questioning regarding financial crimes and conspiracy. Most of the funeral guests dispersed quickly, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Only Ji-woon's closest associates and family members remained. If you're enjoying this dramatic turn of events, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating Afro-Korean stories like this one. Now, let's continue with what happened after this shocking revelation. In the days following the funeral fiasco, Seoul buzzed with rumors and speculation. The story of the empty coffin and the maid who exposed the truth spread like wildfire through social media and news outlets. Journalists camped outside the Kim mansion, hoping for a glimpse of the man who had risen from the dead or the Afro-Korean woman who had dared to speak up. Inside the mansion, a different kind of reckoning was taking place. Ji-woon, still weakened from his genuine stroke but very much in control of his faculties, had moved back into his suite of rooms. Attorney Park worked tirelessly beside him, undoing the damage Min-hee and Tae-ho had attempted during his absence. Nia, who had expected to fade back into anonymity once the truth was revealed, was surprised to receive a formal invitation to return to the Kim household, not as a maid, but as Ji-woon's personal assistant. "I need someone I can trust implicitly," Ji-woon explained when she hesitantly entered his study. "Someone who sees clearly and speaks honestly, regardless of consequences." "Why me?" Nia asked, still processing the dramatic events of the past week. "There must be more qualified people." "Qualification means nothing without character," Ji-woon replied, gesturing for her to sit. "You risked everything to speak the truth when it would have been easier, and safer, to remain silent. That is a rare quality, especially in my world." Reluctantly, Nia accepted the position. Her new role came with a salary that made her previous earnings seem like pocket change, a suite of rooms in the family wing of the mansion, and access to information that would make most of Seoul's power brokers green with envy. The legal proceedings against Min-hee and Tae-ho moved swiftly, fueled by the evidence Attorney Park had compiled. Financial records revealed elaborate schemes to siphon millions from Hanseong Group into offshore accounts. Text messages and emails documented their plans to declare Ji-woon mentally incompetent if he survived his stroke. Most damning were the recordings of conversations with Dr. Choi, where Min-hee had explicitly discussed maintaining Ji-woon on medication that would keep him sedated and unable to communicate. Dr. Choi, it turned out, had been playing a double game, appearing to comply with Min-hee's instructions while secretly working with Ji-woon and Attorney Park to document the conspiracy. His testimony was crucial in the case against mother and son. 3 months after the funeral, the preliminary hearings began. Seoul's courthouse was packed with reporters and spectators eager to witness the downfall of one of Korea's most powerful families. Min-hee entered the courtroom with her head held high, dressed immaculately in designer clothing that somehow managed to suggest both wealth and appropriate contrition. Tae-ho, by contrast, looked haggard and uncertain, his eyes darting nervously around the courtroom. Nia sat beside Ji-woon in the gallery, acutely aware of the stares and whispers directed their way. Her presence beside the CEO continued to spark speculation, ranging from the professional to the scandalously romantic. "Ignore them," Ji-woon murmured, noticing her discomfort. "People will always talk. What matters is the truth, not perception." The trial revealed the extent of Min-hee and Tae-ho's betrayal. For years, they had been preparing for Ji-woon's death or incapacitation, cultivating allies within the company and establishing secret financial channels. The stroke had simply accelerated their timeline. What surprised many observers was Ji-woon's testimony. Rather than expressing rage or seeking vengeance, he spoke with a kind of weary acceptance. "I failed as both a husband and a father," he stated calmly when asked about potential motives for the betrayal. "I built an empire but neglected the foundations of my home. In my pursuit of power, I created an environment where trust became a weakness and ambition the only virtue. The statement shocked the courtroom. It wasn't an excuse for Min-hee and Taeho's actions, but rather an acknowledgement of the toxic culture he had fostered within his own family. When it was Nia's turn to testify, she spoke simply and directly about what she had observed in the household, the conversations she had overheard, and her interaction with Ji-woon the night before his death was announced. "Why did you speak up at the funeral?" the prosecutor asked. "You must have known the risks." Nia glanced briefly at Ji-woon before answering. "In my father's culture, there is a belief that witnessing a wrong and remaining silent makes you complicit in that wrong. I couldn't be complicit in this deception, no matter the consequences." During cross-examination, Min-hee's attorney attempted to paint Nia as an opportunist seeking to improve her position by currying favor with Ji-woon. "Isn't it true that you had been spending unusual amounts of time alone with Chairman Kim prior to his stroke?" the lawyer asked, his implication clear. "I served him tea and tidied his study when he worked late," Nia replied evenly. "We sometimes talked. There was nothing inappropriate about our interactions. Yet after exposing my client's supposed conspiracy, you were promoted from maid to personal assistant, with a substantial increase in salary and status. Quite a convenient outcome for someone just speaking the truth, wouldn't you say?" Before Nia could respond, Ji-woon's lawyer objected, and the judge sustained. Outside the courtroom, Korean media had taken to calling Nia the truth speaker, a moniker that made her deeply uncomfortable. What she had done didn't feel heroic, it had simply felt necessary. Meanwhile, life at the Kim mansion had changed dramatically. With Min-hee gone, the oppressive atmosphere had lifted somewhat, though the shadows of betrayal lingered in every room. Eun-ji, who had been largely ignorant of her mother and brother's schemes, struggled to reconcile her love for her family with the truth of their actions. One evening, Nia found Eun-ji alone in the garden, staring at the koi pond. "Do you think they ever loved him?" Eun-ji asked without turning around. "My mother and Tae-ho, I mean. Do you think there was ever real affection there?" Nia considered the question carefully. "I think love means different things to different people. For some, it's possessive, more about what someone represents than who they are." Eun-ji sighed. "I keep thinking I should have noticed something. There were signs, weren't there? Little moments when their masks slipped." "We see what we're prepared to see," Nia replied gently. "You loved them. It's natural to trust those we love." "Father doesn't seem angry," Eun-ji observed. "After everything they did, he seems more sad." "I don't understand that." "I think," Nia said slowly, "that your father is mourning something that never existed, the family he wanted rather than the one he had." As the trial progressed, Ji-woon began implementing major changes at Hanseong Group. He dissolved several subsidiaries with known connections to illegal activities and established an ethics committee with actual enforcement powers. Most surprisingly, he announced the creation of the Hanseong Foundation, dedicated to supporting multicultural families and immigrant workers in Korea. "My recent experiences have clarified what truly matters," he explained at the press conference announcing the foundation. "Legacy isn't about buildings or bank accounts. It's about the impact we have on others' lives." When asked if his brush with betrayal and death had changed his perspective, Ji-woon glanced at Nia, who stood quietly at the back of the room. "I was fortunate to have someone in my life who valued truth over comfort," he replied. "That kind of integrity is rare and precious. It's something I hope this foundation will foster in our society." The trial concluded with both Min-hee and Tae-ho receiving sentences, 5 years for Min-hee and 3 for Tae-ho, along with substantial fines and restrictions on their future business activities. The punishment was considered light by many, a reflection of Ji-woon's unexpected clemency during his testimony. "Revenge prolongs suffering," he had told the court. "Justice should end it." 6 months after the funeral that never was, Ji-woon invited Nia to join him for tea in the garden pavilion, a favorite spot where they had often talked during his late-night bouts of insomnia. "I'm stepping down as CEO," he announced without preamble. "The board will announce it next week." Nia couldn't hide her surprise. Are you sure that's what you want? Ji-woon nodded, looking more at peace than she had ever seen him. For decades, I believed power was the ultimate protection. I was wrong. It made me a target, even to those closest to me. He sipped his tea before continuing. I'm restructuring everything. The legitimate businesses will continue under new leadership. The other enterprises will be dismantled completely. And what will you do? Nia asked. Focus on the foundation. And perhaps, he added with a slight smile, learn to live rather than merely exist. He studied her face for a moment. What about you, Nia? What do you want for your future? The question caught her off guard. For so long, her focus had been on survival, on navigating a society that often saw her as an outsider. What did she actually want? I want to make a difference, she said finally. For people like me, mixed heritage, caught between cultures, often invisible. I want to help them be seen and heard. Ji-woon nodded thoughtfully. The foundation needs a director. Someone with integrity, intelligence, and personal understanding of the challenges facing multicultural Koreans. Would you consider taking the position? Nia stared at him, certain she had misheard. Me? I don't have the experience or... Experience can be gained, Ji-woon interrupted. Character is built over a lifetime. You have more of that than most people I've encountered in business or politics. What about the scandal? Having an Afro-Korean woman with no formal qualifications leading your foundation would create talk. Ji-woon's laugh was genuine. After an empty coffin and a family conspiracy, I think we're well past worrying about conventional appearances, don't you? If you're loving this story of courage and transformation, please hit the like button and subscribe to our Afro-Korean channel. Drop a comment telling us what you think about Nia's journey from maid to potential foundation director. Now, let's continue with the final chapters of our story. 1 year later, the Hanseong Foundation had become one of Korea's most respected charitable organizations. Under Nia's leadership, it had established programs supporting multicultural education, legal aid for foreign workers, and cultural exchange initiatives. The foundation's headquarters, located in a renovated hanok in Seoul's Bucheon district, had become a hub for Korea's growing multicultural community. On this particular morning, Nia was reviewing applications for the foundation's scholarship program when her assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Min-hee Kim, recently released after serving 1 year of her sentence on health grounds, stood in the doorway. She looked thinner and older, her designer clothes replaced by a simple blouse and slacks, but her posture remained proud. Mrs. Kim, Nia said, rising from her desk. This is unexpected. I'm sure it is, Min-hee replied, her voice lacking its former imperial tone. May I sit? Nia gestured to a chair, studying the woman who had once wielded such power over her life. How can I help you? Min-hee took a moment before speaking. I came to understand something, she said finally. About perception and reality. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her slacks. In prison, no one cared about my family name or connections. For the first time in decades, I was seen for who I am, not what I represent. It was illuminating. I imagine it would be, Nia replied neutrally. You saw Ji-woon for who he was, Min-hee continued. Not the CEO, not the mafia connection, not the wealthy husband. You saw the man beneath all that. That's why he trusted you. Nia remained silent, uncertain where this conversation was heading. I never did, Min-hee admitted. I married the power, not the person. Perhaps that was my greatest mistake. She reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. This isn't atonement or bribery. It's simply recognition. She placed the envelope on the desk. A donation to your foundation, in my personal name. Use it for whatever program you believe will do the most good. Before Nia could respond, Min-hee stood. I won't take more of your time. I just wanted you to know that even the blind can eventually learn to see. After Min-hee left, Nia opened the envelope. Inside was a check for a substantial sum, along with a note, for those who need to be seen and heard. Min-hee Kim. That evening, Nia drove to Ji-woon's new home, a modest hanok outside Seoul where he lived a simpler life than anyone would have imagined possible for the former CEO and mafia connection. She found him in the garden, tending to a small vegetable patch. "Gardening suits you," she observed, smiling at the sight of the once fearsome businessmen kneeling in the dirt. Ji-woon looked up, returning her smile. "There's something satisfying about creating life instead of controlling it. What brings you here today?" Nia told him about Min-hee's visit and the donation. Ji-woon listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. "People can surprise you," he said finally. "Even after a lifetime of knowing them. Do you miss it?" Nia asked. "The power? The empire?" Ji-woon shook his head. "What I built was impressive but hollow. What you're building has substance and meaning." He gestured around at his simple home. "This isn't a punishment or a retreat. It's the first time I've actually lived by choice rather than obligation." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Eun-ji is applying to medical school," Ji-woon said eventually. "She wants to work with patients who've suffered strokes. Finding meaning in our family tragedy, I suppose." "And Tae-ho?" Ji-woon's expression turned somber. "Still angry. Still blaming everyone but himself. Some lessons take longer to learn than others." Later, as Nia prepared to leave, Ji-woon walked her to her car. "The foundation's anniversary gala is next month," she reminded him. "Will you attend?" Ji-woon hesitated. Public appearances were rare for him now. "Will my presence help or hinder your work?" "The truth?" Nia asked with a slight smile. "Your presence reminds people that change is possible, that even the most powerful can choose a different path." "Then I'll be there," he promised. As Nia drove back to Seoul, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From invisible maid to foundation director, from silent observer to respected voice, all because she had spoken the truth when it mattered most. The following week, Nia was invited to speak at Seoul National University's International Studies Department. Standing before a lecture hall filled with students, she felt a momentary pang of anxiety. Public speaking had never been her strength, and the audience, predominantly Korean with a sprinkling of international students, watched her with curious expressions. 3 years ago, she began, "I was making beds and serving tea in the home of one of Korea's most powerful men. Today, I'm directing a foundation that's changing how this country sees its multicultural citizens." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "You might be wondering how that happened. It wasn't education, though I stand before you with the same degree many of you are pursuing. It wasn't connections or wealth or privilege. It was simply this: when a moment of truth presented itself, I refused to be silent." For the next hour, Nia shared her story, carefully omitting certain sensitive details about Ji-woon's businesses but honestly describing the dynamics of power, visibility, and voice that had shaped her experience. "Korea is changing," she concluded. "Slowly, sometimes reluctantly, but inevitably. The myth of homogeneity is giving way to the reality of diversity. The question is whether that change will be resisted or embraced, whether different voices will be silenced or heard." During the Q&A session that followed, a young woman with clearly mixed heritage raised her hand. "Were you ever afraid?" she asked. "When you spoke up at the funeral, weren't you terrified of the consequences?" Nia considered the question. "Yes," she answered honestly. "I was terrified. But I was more afraid of the person I would become if I chose silence over truth. Sometimes courage isn't about being fearless, it's about acting despite your fear." After the lecture, several students approached to continue the conversation. Among them was a young man who introduced himself as Kim Jun-ho. "My father worked for Hanseong Group for 20 years, he said quietly. He always said there were two sides to Chairman Kim, the businessman everyone feared and the leader who never forgot where he came from. Your story confirms what he believed. Your father was perceptive, Nia replied. People are rarely as simple as their public image suggests. As the anniversary gala approached, preparations intensified. The event would showcase the foundation's accomplishments and announce new initiatives for the coming year. Government officials, business leaders, and cultural figures had accepted invitations, making it one of Seoul's most anticipated social events. The night of the gala, Nia stood nervously in the reception area of the Grand Hyatt, greeting guests as they arrived. She wore a stunning gown that blended Korean and West African design elements, a symbol of her own dual heritage. When Ji-woon arrived, a hush fell over the crowd. Despite his diminished public profile, his presence still commanded attention. He had aged visibly in the past year, his hair now completely gray, but he carried himself with the same quiet authority. You look nervous, he observed as he greeted her. Don't be. You've earned this moment. Throughout the evening, Nia moved from group to group, discussing the foundation's work and future plans. She noticed how many of the attendees, people who might once have overlooked her entirely, now listened attentively to her words. During dinner, Attorney Park, who had remained a steadfast ally, leaned over to whisper, "Look how far you've come from that funeral." From the back of the room to the center stage. It's not about me, Nia insisted. It's about the work. Park smiled knowingly. The best leaders always say that. Doesn't make it any less remarkable. When it was time for Nia to deliver the keynote address, she approached the podium with measured steps, conscious of all the eyes following her progress. 1 year ago, this foundation was just an idea born from difficult circumstances, she began. Today, it represents hope for thousands of people who have too often been overlooked in Korean society. She outlined the foundation's accomplishments, the scholarship program that had sent 20 multicultural students to university, the legal clinic that had helped hundreds of foreign workers secure their rights, the cultural center that celebrated Korea's growing diversity. But our work has only begun, she continued. Tonight, I'm pleased to announce the launch of our newest initiative, the Visibility Project. A murmur ran through the audience as screens around the ballroom displayed images of Koreans with diverse backgrounds, mixed-race children, foreign spouses, long-term immigrants, along with their stories. For too long, these voices have been silent or silenced, Nia explained. This project will document their experiences, celebrate their contributions, and ensure that Korea's multicultural reality is visible to all. She glanced at Ji-woon, seated at the front table. A wise person once told me that legacy isn't about buildings or bank accounts. It's about impact. The Hanseong Foundation exists to create a legacy of inclusion, recognition, and respect, values that transcend cultural differences and speak to our shared humanity. As applause filled the room, Nia felt a sense of completion. The journey from that dramatic funeral to this moment had been extraordinary, but it wasn't the end. It was merely a new beginning. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the staff was clearing away the remnants of the celebration, Ji-woon found Nia on the hotel's terrace, looking out over Seoul's glittering skyline. A successful evening, he said, joining her at the railing. You should be proud. I am, she admitted. Not just of tonight, but of how far we've come. Ji-woon studied her profile. When you shouted those words at my funeral, "He's still alive." Did you have any idea what would follow? Nia laughed softly. Not even slightly. I was just trying to stop what seemed like a terrible injustice. One truth spoken aloud changed everything, Ji-woon mused. For me, for you, for my family, for all those people the foundation now helps. Truth has that power, Nia agreed. When we give it voice. They stood in companionable silence, watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky. Seoul had changed for both of them, from a place of hierarchy and exclusion to one of possibility and purpose. What next? Ji-woon asked finally. Where does the truth speaker go from here? Nia smiled at the nickname she had once disliked but now accepted as part of her story. Forward, she said simply. Always forward. And as the night embraced them, two unlikely allies bound by a moment of courage and honesty, the future stretched before them, not with the certainty of power or wealth, but with the richer promise of truth and purpose. If you enjoyed this story of courage, transformation, and the power of speaking truth, please hit the like button, subscribe to our Afro-Korean channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Every view, like, and subscription helps us bring more stories like Nia's to life. Thank you for watching.